This is one of the harshest and most thrilling survival challenges on the planet. The 100-day battle at Chilko Lake, a place known as one of the coldest, wildest, and most unforgiving lands on Earth. Each contestant is allowed to bring only 10 essential items to face nature completely alone. The rules may sound simple. Whoever lasts until the very end will take home $500,000 in cash, while those who give up will leave empty-handed. But the path to victory is filled with peril. 10 people, 10 fates, forced to rely on their hunting skills, foraging abilities, and unbreakable willpower to survive. Yet, nature does not yield so easily. A single encounter with a black bear or a mountain lion could turn the hunter into prey in the blink of an eye. No more words are needed. Let's begin the most brutal 100-day survival journey in the world right now. The first contestant, Clay, swiftly showcased his skill this season. While scouting the forest, he stumbled upon an animal trail and decided to follow it, finding several porcini mushrooms along the way. He gathered a good amount before the trail ended at a spot filled with fallen trees. Suddenly, he noticed a grouse and, with more than 10 years of archery experience, amazed viewers by striking it from over 20 meters away. Down by the lake, he prepared the grouse, carefully keeping his cooking area apart from his shelter to avoid drawing bears. Just as he was about to cook, a sound rose behind him. Turning, he saw a cougar staring straight at him. Instead of backing away, Clay charged toward it, hoping to send it climbing up a tree. Had he carried his bow, the outcome might have been different, but his courage was unquestionable. The second contestant, Tim, was astonished to be chosen for the show, and upon arrival, he felt both thrilled and anxious, even shedding tears on camera. A seasoned hunter who has fished and set traps since childhood, Tim is capable of taking down bears with his arrows. As a father of 6, he entered the competition to better his family's living conditions. Within just half an hour of arriving, he spotted 2 grouse, but also came across countless grizzly bear tracks. This region holds one of the densest grizzly bear populations in North America, making it impossible to fully escape their territory. After a night of heavy rain, Billy's tarp had collected a large pool of water. He strained out the grit with his teeth and drank big gulps straight on camera. Billy, who loves both music and the outdoors, usually spends his days managing his band and practicing different survival skills. Recently, his fiancée became pregnant with twins, and he entered the Alone Challenge mainly to earn the prize money for his family. Like the other participants, he carried a bow and wore overalls, hunting for game around his camp, but he came across only berries. He later wandered to the lake, where he noticed a rivet in a piece of driftwood washed ashore. Without a knife at hand, he worked hard to pry out the rivet, hoping to shape it into a blade. Heating it in charcoal, striking it with the back of an axe, and polishing it down, he managed to create a crude wilderness knife. The next contestant, Matt, was at first unsettled by the unfamiliar surroundings. His unease quickly shifted when he spotted a moose swimming across the lake. Though too distant for him to take a shot with his bow, a successful kill would have supplied enough food to last the entire contest, just as it had for Season 6 winner Jordan. Matt and his wife are teachers of primitive living skills, skilled in crafting tools and hunting. With more than 20 years of lighting fires in the wild without matches, he chose to depend on a friction firemaking method, even though the high elevation would take twice the normal time to spark a flame. Ross is the first woman to compete this season. She has been resting in a makeshift shelter near the lake, but is now focused on finding a permanent home. Though she may appear gentle, she is tough enough to face crocodiles and is set on hunting all 29 large North American species with a bow, determined to prove she is every bit as capable as a man. She discovers a good clearing not far from the water and chooses to settle there. She lashes 2 tripods together with rope and drapes a tarp over them, forming a basic shelter. The compact space helps trap warmth, and with the smoke sealed out, she can enjoy a short moment of rest. By the 4th day, Tim had burned much energy constructing his shelter and ended up losing 6 pounds. Hungry for food, he attempted to hunt a grouse with a stone, a strange choice given his proven skill with a bow. His toothbrush became useful, as he cut off the tip, carved a hole, and fixed a hook and line to it, turning it into a lure. He then tried fishing by the lake, but the fierce winds made casting the line nearly impossible, so he chose to return to his shelter to recover. Before relocating to her new camp, Rose consumed a large amount of berries since she could not find any other reliable food source. The berries kept her going, but that night she was struck by intense stomach pain and nausea. The heavy fructose in the wild berries led to bloating, cramping, and vomiting, leaving her awake for most of the night as she threw up the very berries she had eaten. The following day, Clay crafted a fishing pole from a branch and improvised a reel. Later, needing extra strength to enlarge his shelter, he went out fishing at dawn. After roughly an hour, he felled a pull on the line and hauled in a 2.5-pound rainbow trout, the season's first catch, using nothing more than a bottle cap and umbrella cord as bait. During the day, Tim's luck grew even worse. That afternoon, while searching for food, he spotted a grouse darting into the bushes. His overwhelming eagerness and quickened breaths of excitement, combined with days of scarce food and low energy, triggered a heart attack. Abandoning the grouse, he rushed back to his shelter in severe chest pain. Aware of his past heart problems, and though he dreaded letting down his supportive wife, he tearfully made the call to leave the competition, becoming the first contestant to be evacuated. After just 6 short days, Tim was forced to withdraw from the competition. Now, on this frozen land, only 9 contenders remain standing. That alone shows the brutal intensity of the challenge, where every mistake, every fleeting moment of weakness could cost you your place in the game. The $500,000 prize may sound tempting, but to grasp it, you must pay with sweat, tears, and even your very survival. This is no leisurely adventure, but a life-and-death battle against nature itself. Coulter entered the competition because his mother is an avid follower of wilderness survival shows. He lives alone on a remote island where he built his own utilities and had already spent 42 days there last winter, making this challenge fairly stress-free for him. As he adapted to his new surroundings, he came across a trail left by a grizzly bear and found an abundance of berries nearby, a clear reminder that he must remain highly vigilant. The 8th contestant, Teresa, is a rare master of Stone Age skills, adept at crafting tools from stone, bone, and wood. She entered the competition seeking the prize money to sustain her chosen way of life. Shortly after arriving, she quickly located berries and edible plants. Teresa soon picked a temporary campsite, setting up a simple shelter with a tarp and a leaning tree trunk. She then placed her cooking area beside the lake to avoid drawing the attention of bears. The next contestant, Nate, spent 24 years in the military, with tours in both Iraq and Afghanistan. This background forged a resilient character and sharpened his ability to stay calm under pressure. He is skilled in friction firemaking and trap setting. Near his drop-off point, he spotted a grouse perched in a tree. After positioning his camera, he stepped into view, drew his bow, and took aim. Yet, even at close range, his arrow missed, sailing just beneath the grouse. Acting with care, Michelle began by holding a cricket up close to the camera, then steadied herself before eating it. She commented that though a little tough, the flavor wasn't bad. Having lived in Alaska for 4 years among Siberian natives, Michelle learned numerous survival skills, such as setting traps and recognizing edible plants. Though petite in build, she carries a resilient inner strength. Her survival plan at first revolved around gathering plants, and she discovered a hillside full of nodding onions, which she called a forager's paradise. When cooked, these onions provide about 22 calories per 100 grams, giving her an easier start than many others. She also gathered plenty of rose hips. While eating them, she suddenly noticed a grizzly bear swimming toward her from several meters away across the lake. Alarmed, Michelle slipped into the woods and waited until the bear passed before feeling safe once more. The final contestant, Jordan, began his day by eating ants he found in rotting wood, describing their sour, lemon-like flavor despite the tiny amount. He chose a clearing to build his long-term shelter, a skill sharpened by his years in the wilderness. He entered the show to win the prize money, hoping to pay off his mortgage and spend more time with his family. Jordan set out to construct a sturdy lean-to cabin with thick logs, convinced that the heavy early effort would benefit him later. Using mortise joints, he fitted the logs together and had completed half the frame by midday. That night, while sleeping in a small tarp tent, he awoke at 10:39 p.m. to the sound of a large animal outside. He quickly recognized it as a bear, which luckily fled at the noise he made. The following day, he found a trail just 20 to 25 meters from camp, explaining the bear's presence. Shaken but unwilling to move again, he decided his top priority was finding food, as the building work was draining his strength. Though still feeling strong, Teresa concentrated on building her shelter. She intended to create a pit house, a semi-underground dwelling praised for retaining heat. Lacking proper tools, she relied on sticks, rocks, and a moose bone she uncovered to dig into the ground. Along the way, she found insect larvae in the soil and snacked on them for energy. After 5 to 6 hours of exhausting labor, she had already burned through thousands of calories. Coulter opted for an extra tarp instead of a fire starter, becoming the second contestant to make that choice. His first 2 attempts at bow drill firemaking were successful, but today he struggled and grew concerned. At last, he managed to spark a flame with much effort and swore never to let it die again. Unlike others who prioritized shelters, Coulter chose to build a boat first to fish in the lake. Though inexperienced in boat building, his background in rowing helped him shape it decently. He wrapped it with the spare tarp and packed it with sticks for added buoyancy. Then he carved paddles with an axe and eagerly set the boat afloat for a trial. The good news, it floated well. The bad news, it was unstable and needed more support. Yesterday, Nate gathered chanterelles, planning to cook soup this morning, but squirrels carried off half his find, souring his mood. To ensure survival, he chose to fish with a trot line, a main cord with baited branch hooks at intervals, for better chances of a catch. After setting it by the lake, he only needed to check it now and then. Nate first meant to collect wood for his shelter, but ran into the squirrel and reclaimed the stolen mushrooms. He considered shooting it to improve his meal. After gathering timber, Nate built a simple A-frame shelter, stacked acorns on the sides, covered it with a tarp, and completed his task. He then inspected the trot line. Lake Chilko proved generous without much effort, and he smoothly hauled a fish ashore. Though not too large, the fish, mixed with chanterelles and berries, stewed together, helped ease his fatigue. Day 7 came, and Baiko began building early in the morning. He first fixed the roof beams and posts, stripping bark to reduce fire risk and shield the tarp from tearing. Extra effort went into the wall facing the wind, layering branches and bark. With that, the basics were secured. Driftwood found near the shore worked perfectly for a bed. He gathered branches for padding to lie on, making it quite comfortable. His shelter was nearly finished, yet his stomach remained empty. Yesterday he almost caught a fish, but it slipped away. So far, no grouse or deer were seen, and the dense trees made hunting unrealistic. He decided to check the opposite side of the bay. Since land crossing was impossible, he swam across in only a bathing suit, despite water at 11 degrees Celsius. After swimming 800 meters, the thick forest disappointed him, offering only a few berries. Branches blocked his arrows, and he swam back with nothing, burning thousands of calories. Tonight he had to settle for a soup of petals and roots, troubled by autumn nearing and the chance of even grass running out. Clay began with grouse and mushrooms, caught a trout, and by day 7 still had half of it left. Fearing a bear might steal his prize, he tied the legs of his spare underwear tightly, placed the fish inside, and hung it high in the air. With a relatively steady food supply, his shelter was nearly done. He used moss to fill gaps between wood and stones, tested the fire in his fireplace, and was pleased with the flawless results. Now turning his focus to food, Clay, aware of his lean build, realized he couldn't survive simply by enduring hunger. He needed to hunt large game, like elk, to truly stand a chance. Targeting an open, bushy slope where he believed deer might roam, he set off, only to discover a forest ravaged by fire, with charred wood littering the ground and making travel difficult. After a fruitless and exhausting hunt, fortune struck when he stumbled upon a meadow full of berries. Determined to save some for later, he applied the principle that cold air sinks, digging a hole in a low spot, enclosing it with wooden panels, lining it with moss, and carefully storing 4 liters of berries for gradual consumption. Matt's situation wasn't much better than Clay's. He too had failed to secure any meat. He resorted to digging up wild chives, chopping them finely, then cooking them with other wild greens into a thin soup. It barely gave him enough calories. After finishing the broth, he planned to hunt with his bow and arrow, only to discover mice had gnawed the bowstring overnight. Furious, Matt cursed the rodents in a long tirade. It would be a huge loss to quit the contest over this, so he tried to mend the string. Though not as strong as before, it was still usable. Later, Matt set up a deadfall trap, determined to make the mouse pay for its mischief and to add meat to his otherwise vegetarian meals. Turning to the female contestant Ross, her shelter was likely the simplest. She had started foraging early, crafting a fishing rod from wire and branches, complete with reel and lure, trying to mimic modern fishing methods. She hoped to catch 7 or 8 fish a day, but by 6 p.m. at the lake, not even a nibble appeared. Fish resources here were not as abundant as in Canada's Great Slave Lake back in Season 7 that evening. Michelle faced a tougher day. She unearthed a few cow parsley roots during daylight, using their hollow stalks to stoke her fire, and roasting the bulbs to eat. Native Americans once used them as food. Michelle tasted one with hesitation, but the flavor was awful. Nothing remotely pleasant. Only the lake's fish could truly supply the nutrition her body demanded. She crafted a longer fishing rod, anchoring it with rocks by the shore, hoping for a decent catch. She intended to enlarge her shelter, yet soon felt a wave of nausea from her gut to her armpits. She had confused deadly water hemlock with cow parsnip, as they resemble each other though the first is highly poisonous. Michelle chewed on charcoal, trying to weaken the toxin. Around 4:02 a.m., she awoke feeling a bit improved. Fortunately, she had taken only a small bite. Otherwise, leaving the challenge would have been inevitable. Jordan, once a carpenter, became obsessed with perfecting his shelter. Sadly, time and strength were not on his side. Yet, the quality of his hut remained the finest among all contestants this season. Now, Jordan desperately needed food to regain energy. He couldn't recall how many times he had tried casting his line. After waiting patiently for nearly 2 to 3 hours, he was stunned when he finally pulled a fish to shore. Overcome with joy, he shouted as the catch weighed more than 2 pounds, enough to sustain him for at least 3 days. Quickly, he cleaned and prepared the fish, planning to cook a rich head soup, seasoned with chopped wild yellow essence roots. While the soup simmered over the fire, he smoked the remaining slices of fish, leaving them to dry slowly for storage and survival. On day 13, Teresa hung her freshly washed clothes to dry. Adopting a half-sitting posture, she had become skilled at warming herself by the fire before returning to her shelter. The frame of the cabin was now complete, and the next task was to raise the walls. She used large slabs of bark stripped from dead fir trees, stacking them from bottom to top like tiles, then sealing the gaps with pine shavings for stronger insulation. Spaces had been left open for a fireplace and a doorway. As she gazed at the bare interior, Teresa envisioned a proper bed. She planned to bind several logs with wire to form a solid frame, lay wooden planks across it, and top the surface with grass and branches, creating a rough mattress for comfort. The boat Coulter had first used was unstable, so he built 2 smaller crafts, using the last of his tarp and binding them with firwood braces along the sides. When he tested them again in the lake, they worked without issue. Not only was their stability far better, but the maneuverability was excellent, allowing him to move forward, backward, and even rotate with ease. Thrilled, Colt stripped down and leapt into the lake for a refreshing bath. Yet his moment of peace was cut short when he noticed a grizzly bear watching from afar and slowly moving closer. Colt quickly fired a bear banger, which at first had no effect. The beast halted briefly, then pressed on. A second shot made it retreat a few steps into the woods, but it still lingered and edged forward again. Only the third blast finally drove it away. That night, Colt remained shaken by the encounter, though relieved the bear had at last disappeared. After much thought, Nate chose to build a dock in the deeper water, hoping it might help. Using dovetail joinery techniques he had once learned from his neighbor, he bound several logs into piles. Yet as he carried them into the lake, he grew irritated by the icy water and frustrated when the piles fell apart before his eyes. Realizing he had forgotten to add support beams, Nate did not let himself be discouraged. Instead of wasting time on complaints, he turned his focus toward fixing the problem ahead. Craftsman Jordan, who was living comfortably with a steady supply of food, was handed a painting of a fish he caught a few days ago. The smoked fish has a reddish hue and a fragrant aroma, tasting even better than he expected. His cabin is almost complete, only lacking a door. Without an electric drill, Jordan plans to make a door using wire and wood. He uses his imagination, cutting a groove in the wood with a saw and securing it with wire to the wall and the door's crossbars. He then binds it with harder wood, creating a perfect fit. Finally, he uses a bent branch as a door latch, completing the cabin. On day 16, Colt dreamt of delicious food and decided to treat himself since he hadn't eaten meat in half a month. He paddled to the center of the lake, and a fish immediately bit his line, but it got away before he could pull it out. Over the next 3 hours, he had 4 bites but failed to catch any fish, showing his fishing skills needed improvement. Fortunately, his perseverance paid off, and he finally caught a rainbow trout weighing about half a pound, proving his boat and fishing methods were effective. He quickly thought of several fishing techniques to try in the future, feeling a step closer to the $500,000 prize. To prevent homesickness, Jordan's main strategy is to keep himself busy. This time, he decided to make a pipe. He drilled a hole in a stick to form the bowl, cut off the excess, and carved it slightly for style. Then, he inserted a hollow branch as the handle, completing his wilderness-style pipe. He filled it with traditional Native American tobacco, living more and more refinedly each day. Nate sits in his camp, drinking freshly brewed pine needle tea with a squirrel on a nearby branch. Contestant Ross's breakfast is unappetizing seaweed. So far, she hasn't caught a single fish and hopes to use a trap to sustain herself for another month. However, the trap is crudely made. Large fish cannot enter and small fish can escape. She places it in the shallow waters near the shore, securing it with stones. Time will tell, but she expects to catch nothing. Fortunately, there are berries in the grass, her sole source of nutrition these days. As days pass, the berries either fall to the ground or turn black, and she believes they will all be gone in half a month. Since finishing his pipe, Jordan seems to have lost his spirit, completely absorbed in missing his family. Keeping busy no longer helps him cope. Viewers of wilderness survival shows can probably guess that he ended up making the expected call to quit the competition. Clay hasn't had a successful catch since landing a 2-pound rainbow trout on day 5. Today, he decides to make a scoop net. He crafts the frame himself and uses the inner core of a parachute cord. It takes him half an hour to finish the net. He heads to a spot he scouted earlier, but it seems the fish in the lake know he's equipped with a net, as they won't even bite the hook. Michelle finds a few snails, which taste like crispy chicken. These days, she relies on snails and crickets for protein, not having had a proper meal. Her fishing rods in the lake haven't yielded anything either. Like Ross, she plans to make a fish trap, but her craftsmanship far surpasses Ross's. She persists through the hardship, hoping to use the prize money to care for her brother-in-law, who has Down syndrome. Michelle places her fish trap in deeper water, hoping to catch some fish. Matt is under significant pressure as a survival instructor by profession, and he hasn't achieved notable success. Others have at least shot a grouse, but he hasn't even caught a fish until now. Suddenly, Matt finally catches a rainbow trout, though it's as small as the one Nate caught earlier. He eagerly returns to make a soup with wild chives, savoring every bit, including the leftover fish bones. Such a small amount of food can't fill his hungry stomach. After half a month, his solution is meditation, using his thoughts to communicate with his family to alleviate his pain. He then realizes his shelter lacks insulation. He might manage now, but it won't be good as the weather cools. Being the contestant with the least body fat, he needs to enhance his warmth measures. Matt finds a dense grassy area in the forest and decides to gather some dry grass for bedding. Unexpectedly, he disturbs a ground wasp nest preparing for winter. Several stings later, he runs out. Baiko made a knife from a rivet he pulled out of deadwood and showed it off in front of the camera. It works well for chopping wood. Only 18 days into the challenge, he has already lost 31 pounds. Although he is quite heavy, he can't keep this up forever. The dense forest in his area makes hunting impossible, so he plans to weave a fish basket from willow branches to catch fish in the lake. While talking to himself and weaving the basket, he suddenly hears noises from the slope below and turns to see 2 grizzly bears. He quickly fires a bear banger, scaring them away. It's his first encounter with grizzlies in decades, and his heart is still pounding after the danger has passed. When he places the finished basket in the lake, he wonders if it can really catch fish in such shallow water. Michelle, having nothing else to do, constructs a conical shelter to protect her fire. After working, she feels unprecedentedly weak. She desperately needs food, as she only has berries and wild vegetables today, which provide very little energy. To get enough salt, she even eats her own mucus, but she's still getting weaker by the day. She hopes the fish basket will yield some results, but upon reaching the lake, she's stunned to see it empty, either washed up on rocks or possibly retrieved by a bear. This plunges her spirits, and she is unable to imagine how she'll continue. She even notices her teeth discoloring from malnutrition. Feeling close to her limit, she remembers seeing some grouse near her dwelling. She takes her bow and arrows and puts her last hopes on hunting. After wandering in the woods for several minutes, her legs are weak, and despite her efforts, she sees no grouse. She collapses in a chair at her campsite. Just then, she sees a grouse hiding behind a tree within her sight. She quietly approaches for a shot, but the grouse dashes into the bushes and disappears. With her last hope gone, she decides after a moment of thought to call and quit the competition. On the 21st day of the challenge, 7 contestants remain. Due to poor fishing results, Clay shifts his hopes back to hunting. Otherwise, with his physique, he definitely cannot compete with the other heavyweights. He walks a long time to a previously unexplored forest area. Calming down, he carefully observes his surroundings and listens to the sounds of animals. Finally, he discovers a good sign: a pile of deer droppings, the first deer trace he has found since the start of the challenge. Since it's getting late, he heads back. Matt, the only survival coach this season, has not met his own expectations. Eventually, he couldn't take it anymore. Regardless of how others might criticize him in the future, at least his family won't mock him. He decisively made the call to withdraw from the competition. After finding the area with deer activity, Clay followed the same route back the next day. Seeing fresh droppings on the ground, he surmised the deer were still active. Around noon, he indeed spotted a black-tailed deer staring straight at him. Afraid to startle it, Clay froze. Once the deer lowered its guard and began to move, he seized the opportunity to shoot an arrow. Reaching the spot where the deer was hit, he followed the blood trail and found the broken arrow, indicating the deer couldn't have gone far. The black-tailed deer finally expired in the grass. At that moment, Clay's anxiety was relieved, and he couldn't help but shout with joy. The deer weighed about 60 kilograms. With numerous grizzly bears in the forest, Clay wasted no time and began to butcher the deer, carrying several legs back to his shelter, which was 4 kilometers away. Fearing that bears might be attracted by the scent, he hurried back. By 5 p.m., he had brought all the deer meat back to camp. After removing the skin, bones, and offal, about 46 kilograms of pure meat remained. Keeping it in the shelter posed a risk of attracting bears, so he had to find another place to store it. Fortunately, the production team had provided each contestant with a heavy rope specifically for hanging meat. Clay hung the deer meat 7 to 8 meters high, making it difficult for any bears to steal. That evening, he fried deer heart and deer fat, and the aroma gradually spread through the air, eagerly anticipating the taste. As for Colt, he had also hoped to rely on hunting deer for food storage, but he hadn't seen even a trace of deer so far. He had no choice but to gather wild onions and berries. Thankfully, the low temperatures meant the berries could stay fresh in a cave for 3 weeks. Taking advantage of their availability, Colt spent time each day gathering them to prepare for winter. When talking about the $500,000 prize, he envisioned using the money to build a community farm to give more people a chance to experience the wilderness. However, unexpected events occur quickly. The next day, as he went to have some berries for breakfast, he discovered a bear had raided his storage overnight, eating half of them. Due to local legal restrictions, fishing nets could only be used after surviving for 45 days. Naturally, Colt also thought of making a large fish basket using fir branches. After completing the basket, which was over 1 meter tall, it was the only one that seemed hopeful among the contestants' creations, as others were either too small or too crudely made. Rowing to the middle of the lake, Colt wasn't sure how deep the water was. He placed the basket, marking the spot with driftwood. Logically, there should be a good chance of catching fish. Nate has lost 32 kilograms from hunger, his cheekbones now prominently visible. Each day he looks forward to checking his fishing line at the dock, his mood lifting with excitement. He slowly drags a fish toward the shore, but just as he is about to secure it, the fish slips off the hook. Nate quickly rushes into the water to catch it, but sadly watches as the fish escapes back into the lake. Without fish, he continues to drink pine needle tea. Having learned a painful lesson, Nate decides to build a scoop net. He uses Y-shaped branches to create a circular frame and parachute cord for the netting. Although the net is a bit rough and small compared to Clay's, it should work for catching fish. When testing it, Nate finds another small fish pulling on the line, the second one he's caught. On day 23, the meat Clay hung in the tree remains untouched by grizzly bears. Clay plans to build a smokehouse to preserve the meat through dehydration for a longer period. The structure must be robust to keep out grizzly bears. He uses a simple mortise and tenon structure, stacking cut logs into a square shape, binding wire inside for hanging the meat, and plugging gaps in the walls with moss. The roof is also covered with a thick layer of moss for waterproofing. He patiently slices the deer meat into strips, hanging over 46 kilograms of it in the smokehouse. By waiting overnight, the meat can be preserved for several months. Clay is now firmly leading in resource management. Teresa has finally completed her pit house, but must still test its smoke ventilation. The results are disappointing. Within half an hour, the smoke makes it impossible for her to keep her eyes open. She gathers a large number of stones from nearby to build a meat smoker over the fire pit, filling the gaps with mud. The height is level with the ground, facilitating cover. The improved fire quickly shows effects, allowing her to move from her tent to the pit house. The pit house's insulation far surpasses other contestants' wooden shelters, allowing Teresa to conserve energy by sleeping in just a sleeping bag. Turning back to Nate, he forgot to cover his iron pot before going to sleep 2 days ago. Drinking water in the dim morning light, he didn't notice several squirrel droppings in the pot until daylight. He's unsure if this will cause illness, but feels fine so far today. He plans to make a fishing rod with a reel for longer casts, taking advantage of the dock's extension to catch bigger fish. After completing the rod and reel, Nate starts feeling nauseous and cold. At 5 p.m., he suspects an infection from salmonella carried in the squirrel feces, as nausea and chills are typical symptoms. Regretfully, he makes the call to withdraw from the competition. Biko hasn't eaten any meat since the challenge began and has lost 50 pounds. His fishing trap in the lake has been set for a week, hoping to catch a few fish to satisfy his craving for meat. Unfortunately, each time he checks, the trap is empty. With no other option, he tries fishing again. After nearly 2 hours by the lake, he finally catches a rainbow trout weighing about 1.5 pounds. Biko quickly goes back to build up the fire and stews the trout with some wild vegetables. While waiting for the fish to cook, he keeps an eye out for grizzly bears, fearing they might appear from nowhere and steal his catch. Eating just the fish meat is no longer enough to satisfy his protein needs, so he consumes the bones as well to feel fully satisfied. As the weather gets colder each day, it's necessary for Rose to install a large door on her squash shack to block the wind. Otherwise, the cold north wind at night is too much for her to withstand. On day 8, she had found some wooden planks with nails still in them, which she hadn't used. Ross pulled the nails out, made a tripod from sticks, and wove some pine branches on top. By day 26, only 5 contestants remain. Biko, who had finally caught a rainbow trout, now only has a few sips of soup left, but they still taste incredibly delicious to him, as this was the first meat he's eaten since the challenge began. Feeling the cold weather, he plans to make a wooden door using the classic design of 5 logs with 2 horizontal supports, and stuffs it with pine resin to enhance the wind-blocking effect. He uses a wire to tie it to the house, avoiding even the effort of saying "open sesame" by just stepping on it. After fixing the door, he must also sort out the fireplace, so he won't have to go outside to start a fire or boil water when it's windy or rainy. The stones are piled up on the lakeshore, and moving them to the shelter requires going up a steep slope. For an ordinary person, it's a simple task, but for Billy, who has been starving for months, it's a strenuous activity. Billy uses clay instead of cement to build a semicircular fireplace with stacked stones. It doesn't take much time, and the smoke ventilation works quite well. Rose sits inside her squash shack, using a found glass bottle as a hand warmer. The low energy intake makes her always feel cold, so she relies on this simple method to warm her hands, occasionally adding rose hips to the bottle for a unique flavor and a significant boost in vitamin C. Her luck with fishing has been poor, and now she thinks about setting traps in the woods to catch rabbits, a method she hasn't tried yet. Although squirrels are protected by local laws and cannot be trapped, making the wire loop larger should prevent harming them. Still, it carries some risks, which might be why the contestants are hesitant to set traps. Ross has no choice but to take this path now, with her mind focused solely on getting food to keep going. Fortunately, while setting traps, her sharp eyes spot a bear trap among some dry leaves. Since 2017, trapping bears has been banned for non-indigenous people, and given its rusty condition, it's definitely several years old. 2 days after setting up the traps, Ross found bear tracks on the ground while checking them. The tracks were near the lake, not far from where she was staying. As she was about to leave, Ross saw the bear that made the tracks coming towards her, which frightened her immensely. Ross hadn't recovered from the scare when she questioned whether risking her life for $500,000 was worth it. She held the emergency communicator in her hand, ready to press the button to quit. However, after calming down, she decided to continue the challenge. She caught an unlucky smoke-colored jackrabbit, the first rabbit caught this season. Rose had never had a full stomach, so she quickly cleaned the rabbit and set up a pot over a fire outside the camp. She exclaimed, "Oh my God," smelling the delicious aroma. After cooking, she ate the rabbit heart first, savoring its protein content, which was much higher than beef, chewing slowly before swallowing. Clay wanted to use the deer hide to make a lure hat, both to get closer to other animals for more hunting opportunities and as a way to respect the hunted black-tailed deer by using every part of it. After removing the deer hide, he scraped off the fat, meat scraps, and cartilage to prevent rot. He then stitched the eyes and mouth, filling them with moss to create the lure hat. Clay scooped out the deer brains, mashed them into a paste in an iron pot, and spread it over the hide. The brain paste contained lecithin, a natural agent used for making leather. Coulter, unable to get meat, decided to go after morels, abundant in his area. He collected 13 kilograms of them and hung them to dry inside his cabin, hoping they would last until day 45, when he planned to catch big fish using a net and a tarp boat. A sudden heavy snowfall prevented Colt from collecting more, so he worked on improving his shelter to withstand the cold, covering the roof and walls with pine branches. Teresa followed a similar path, relying on edible plants for survival, because she believed the caloric content of plants was underestimated. She had tried fishing several times without success, or only catching month-old fry. She focused on collecting plants, targeting bright red bearberries and Solomon seal roots in the fields. However, engrossed in her work, Teresa realized she had lost her way, which filled her with an unstoppable fear. Tearfully, she told the camera she was ready to quit. Her feet frantically searched for a way out. Seeing more trees blown down by the wind, she knew she was getting closer to the lake. Once she found her way back to the shelter, she stopped talking about quitting. Her outing yielded 3 cans of cranberries, a bag of rose hips, a bag of wild vegetables, and some Solomon seal roots, barely enough to sustain her for the day. To conserve her fat reserves, she depended on fish from the lake. Teresa built a small raft from logs, tying a trawling rope at the bottom, ready to pull the raft into deeper waters. Setting up for the first time required her to brave the cold water, wearing a life jacket and carrying an emergency communicator. After stretching her limbs, she swam into deeper water. Unexpected inflation of the life jacket disrupted her rhythm, tangling the rope around her clothing and complicating what should have been a quick task. Her legs, freezing and reddened near hypothermia, forced her back to shore. She stayed by the fire for a long time, and although she recovered by nightfall, her legs were burned from being too close to the flames. Coulter, on his 10th check of his hand-woven fish traps, had yet to catch anything. He stayed to fish, and his luck finally turned, catching 2 small fish, each only about half a pound. If only they were bigger, he could have had a hearty meal. Clay heard noises outside his camp in the middle of the night. Wearing a headlamp, he saw nothing. The sounds disappeared by dawn. He realized a gray bear had approached within meters of his food storage. Worried about his dried deer meat being stolen, he planned to set up an alarm system. He tied a bear whistle to a tree, surrounding the storage with a string that would trigger the whistle if a bear stumbled upon it, loud enough to scare off even a tiger. With limited smoked deer meat, he could only eat a little over 2 ounces a day, or it would be gone in less than half a month. Relying solely on deer meat was not enough for victory. Like the others, Clay needed fish from the lake to maintain his weight, but he too had no luck catching any. On day 32, Baiko woke up early to find several holes chewed in his clothes by mice. It had been over 10 days since he last ate meat, and he was in urgent need of protein and fats. The ground, covered in snow, was very slippery. Despite walking cautiously, he still slipped and twisted his ankle, which was already injured. Baiko went to the lake to calm his mind and fish, but after 5 hours he caught nothing. Even with a strong mindset, this situation could be disheartening. Teresa's knees were blistered from burns, the painful price compounded by her trolling rope tangling into a mess, rendering it useless. Unable to contain her frustration any longer, she crouched by the lake and cried for a few minutes. Coulter was having a rough day. He went to check his fish traps, only to find them stuck under debris in the water. After several attempts to free them failed, he cut the nylon rope to minimize the loss. Rose ventured into the woods to check if her traps had caught any rabbits, hoping rabbit meat would sustain her. However, she was unsettled to find cougar tracks in the snow following her own. She worried that even if the traps caught rabbits, the cougar could be a threat. Indeed, the cougar hadn't taken any rabbits, but it had tampered with the traps, making successful hunting even more challenging. Rose felt her toes throbbing with pain. Back at the shelter, she removed her shoes and socks and discovered frostbite symptoms, meaning she had to warm her toes every hour, severely limiting her time outside and reducing her work efficiency. The competition enters day 36. Teresa cleaned her camera lens in the early morning, clearing away the haze from previous shots. She then left her hut to forage, unwilling to live solely as a vegetarian in the wild. Despite repeated failures in both fishing and hunting, she had been surviving only on plants. Unexpectedly, while strolling along the lakeshore, she discovered a small fish lying on the gravel, an unexpected source of protein, most likely dropped by an eagle. Her fortune didn't stop there, for she soon spotted another fish swimming close by, weighing nearly 3 pounds and still fresh enough to eat. If the other contestants had known, they would surely envy her astonishing find, located just steps away from her shelter. Already weakened, Teresa understood how crucial these two fish were. Though the boiled meat tasted unpleasant, she forced herself to swallow every bite, hoping it would give her the strength to endure another 7 to 10 days. Rose's condition was bleak. Her frostbitten toes ached with relentless pain. The rabbit she had managed to catch was gone, leaving only a thin soup hanging from a tree several dozen meters from camp. She longed to retrieve it for breakfast, yet her frail body made walking feel as grueling as running a marathon. Soon, she could no longer hold the camera steady, her vision blurred, and even her hearing began to fade. Realizing the danger, Rose called the medical team for help. After explaining her symptoms and being examined by staff, she was ordered to evacuate at once to avoid severe health risks. Her endurance had been remarkable. Lasting more than 30 days on a single snowshoe hare was already her breaking point. In the end, she was carried onto the boat as she departed. Leaving only 4 contestants in the challenge, they now faced a bitter temperature of -12 degrees. Baiko stayed inside a drafty wooden cabin, an unforgiving place to endure. To cope, he gathered moss from outside, pressing it into every crack between the logs, then lit a fire in the fireplace to bring a trace of warmth within. Gill nets were forbidden before day 45, yet he longed to finish weaving one, placing all his hopes upon it. To prepare, he also carved a soup spoon, imagining how wonderful it would be to sit in the cabin, eating fish and sipping soup with satisfaction. To pass the time more quickly, Baiko fashioned a bare spear, cutting apart his belt to sew a sheath for his knife. The craftsmanship, in the end, turned out surprisingly good. Teresa wore a homemade parka, carefully prepared to withstand the bitter cold during her wilderness solitude. Slipping into fresh clothes instantly lifted her spirits. Today's task was simple yet vital, collecting rose hips. Thanks to the late ripening of rose hips and bearberries, these small fruits had now become her life-saving source of food. She quickly filled the cloth bag she had carried half an hour earlier. While cleaning fish guts on the lakeshore, she noticed countless tiny fish darting in to feed. That gave her the idea of weaving a fish basket. Since large fish were out of reach, catching several small ones would still be worthwhile. After finishing her work, she planned to sink the basket into deeper water. Teresa had already set anchors in place. All she needed was to pull the rope to drag the basket down. Yet things did not go as smoothly as she hoped. The fish basket stuck halfway and refused to budge. She was forced to wade in, using her long legs to step into the lake and set the basket properly. Watching her, I can't help but suspect she did it on purpose. The competition enters day 44. Coulter had begun weaving a gill net, carefully working each knot and float with precision. From morning until nightfall, he pushed himself to complete it on time. Then, at around 2:10 a.m., a sudden, violent wind swept through, giving him a terrible feeling. Afraid his tarp boat might be damaged, he grabbed his headlamp and hurried to the lakeside to check. As expected, 2 of the rope knots had already come loose. Luckily, he discovered it in time. Otherwise, on the very day he could finally use the gill net, the boat might have sunk the night before. That would have been truly infuriating. The next day, Baiko sawed down a slender pine tree and stripped it of all its branches to use as a long pole for securing the gill net. He selected a suitable spot to lower the net and anchored the pole with stones to keep it from being washed away. He hoped the gill net would finally change his fortunes. Otherwise, he would have to rely on his body's fat reserves to endure, much like a bear. Coulter, meanwhile, wasn't in a hurry to enter the water but chose to reinforce his boat, adding a few extra beams and replacing 2 cross beams to improve buoyancy and stability. Once ready, he sailed out and deployed the gill net in deeper water, greatly increasing his chances of catching fish. While everyone else was busy setting nets to catch fish, Clay had the leisure to stuff moss into nets as target practice and occasionally hone his archery skills outside the camp. Today, he also needed to set up his gill net, so he decided to construct a trawling pulley system. Standing on shore, he could easily deploy and retrieve the gill net. He built a tripod from logs, secured an iron ring at the top, connected another iron ring to a buoy anchored in the water, and linked the 2 rings with a nylon rope. This allowed the gill net to be deployed and retrieved freely. During his work, he noticed a teal duck less than 10 meters away. Seizing the rare opportunity, Clay immediately paused his task and shot an arrow at the duck. Unfortunately, a wave pushed the arrow just beneath the duck's belly, and he missed the chance for a follow-up shot. Before the competition, Baiko weighed 250 pounds and carried plenty of body fat. Though hungry, he believed he could endure another 20 days on sheer resolve. Unable to find meat, he turned to wild onions, which grew in abundance near camp. As long as they weren't withered, he could dig them up daily. Baiko even began planting the onions he couldn't finish, hoping to keep them fresh, but in truth, it seemed unlikely there would ever be leftovers. The gill nets remained stubbornly empty. With food scarce, the cold grew harder to bear, leaving his limbs unnaturally chilled. He stretched his feet toward the fire for warmth, only to accidentally burn a large hole straight through his socks. The contestants' luck seemed worse than ever. Teresa had returned to her days of gathering berries for food. Once again, she found no fish by the lake, and even berry picking left her gasping for breath, an obvious sign of long-term food deprivation. It appeared she might soon face evacuation. The competition enters day 56. At this point, Coulter faced the least stress, enjoying steady success with fishing. Earlier in the day, he had even crafted a pair of dice in the melon shed for a bit of entertainment and relaxation. Yet when it came time to check the nets, he was stunned upon reaching the lake. His trusted tarp boat had sunk. Determined to rescue it, Colt dragged the boat ashore. After inspecting it closely, he discovered the cause. Waves had swept water into the cabin, forcing it under. Though a few ribs and seat planks had come loose, the boat remained usable once repaired. Clay had already lost 30% of his body weight, and there wasn't much meat left on the black-tailed deer. He desperately needed fish from the lake to supplement his diet. This time, his gill net finally delivered, catching a rainbow trout frozen in an arc, yielding about 25 calories. Yet the waves had tangled the net once again. Determined, he chose to relocate it near a large boulder. Cutting a log from the forest to use as a ladder, Clay climbed the rock, pulled up the anchor stone connected to the float, and lowered it back into the lake. He shifted the tripod over, reassembled the trawling system, and firmly secured the gill net in place. On day 58, Colt got a foreign object in his eye, making it hard even to open them. Yet he refused to let it affect the competition, especially now that victory was so close. Using a syringe from the medical kit, He flushed out the object, then paddled his tarp boat to check the gill net. At this thrilling moment, the net had caught another bull trout for him. With such momentum, Colt seemed more than capable of lasting the full 100 days. Back at the shelter, he set the iron pot for stew, savoring fish soup and tender meat, his situation looking brighter than ever. After the hearty meal, Colt chopped a large pile of wood, enough to last half a month. With the gill net working so well, he expected the days ahead to grow more comfortable. From dawn till dusk, he kept burning calories, even managing to set another net in the lake. But the very next day, the old net came up empty. Just like that, his good streak seemed to have ended too soon. Let's turn our eyes back to Clay. Seeing the strong winds and the rising waves, he guessed the gill net would bring in no catch, so he decided to head into the forest to hunt grouse and rabbits. Instead, he stumbled upon fresh cougar droppings on the ground. Local laws permitted contestants to hunt cougars, and with his stored deer jerky running low, catching one would not only provide nearly 10 pounds of meat, but also satisfy a long-standing wish. Unfortunately, despite searching the forest all day, he never caught sight of the cougar. That evening, Clay crafted a tube from deer skin, an instrument that could emit sounds resembling both a deer's call and the desperate cry of a dying hare. At dawn the next morning, he left the shelter with bow and arrows in hand, planning to lure a cougar with the sound and strike it down. Yet the situation changed quickly. Gray bears, absent for a long while, had suddenly returned. Clay spotted their tracks in the snow, just 7 or 8 meters from his shelter. He had no choice but to abandon the hunt, for if his deerskin tube attracted a bear instead of a cougar, it would mean a double loss. Teresa never wanted to be a vegetarian, but with her limited skills in fishing and hunting, she once again relied on berries this morning. She mashed the cooked berries, shaped them into small balls, and baked them over the fire, creatively turning them into a meal. While waiting, she sat by the fire, busy with some handicrafts, planning to make a hook for hanging the iron pot. But the moment I saw her handle the saw, I sensed trouble ahead. She wasn't skilled, and as expected, she ended up cutting her left hand. Although the medical kit had the necessary supplies, a severed tendon, something that couldn't heal on its own, would have forced her to call for help and leave the competition. Fortunately, the wound wasn't that severe. Otherwise, being forced to quit in such a way would have been frustrating for anyone. Biko's gill net had never caught a thing, so he chose to move it, refusing to accept that he could not land even a single fish. Climbing the steep slope left him gasping for breath, exposing his physical weakness. That day, a few wild onions from his small garden became his only meal, just enough to keep him going for another week. He had resigned from his job to enter the contest, with almost no money left in his bank account and twins soon to be born. For him, winning the $500,000 prize was not just a dream, but the only way to prevent a looming financial disaster. On day 66, the routine medical checkup arrived, arranged by the show's producers. Every contestant dreaded this moment, knowing it could mean being forced out for health reasons. Yet there was no way to avoid it. When Coulter lifted his shirt, his frail frame revealed the truth. He had lost more than 30 kilograms. The others were not in much better condition, waiting anxiously for their own results. To everyone's surprise, it was Coulter who was disqualified, despite having caught 3 large fish over the past 20 days. The problem lay in the severe weight loss he had suffered earlier. The doctor explained that his cardiovascular system was already under extreme stress, and continuing further risked permanent damage. Such a threat meant automatic removal from the competition. If Lake Chilko in Season 7 had offered the same rich fish resources as Big Slave Lake, Coulter might never have reached this state, and could very well have stood as a strong contender for the championship. Teresa was on the verge of giving up, lacking hunting skills and unwilling to pursue game. She spent the morning crafting a broom inside her pit house. The workmanship was impressive. Taking it outside, she planned to sweep the snow from the roof. Yet, with her strict vegetarian diet, weakness setting quickly, she grew dizzy and collapsed back down. The firewood pile was empty, since she had not gathered any the day before. Forcing herself to move, she went out to collect branches. Each step on solid ground felt as though she were trudging through water. While searching, she stumbled upon deer tracks in the snow, the first since the challenge began. Still, She showed little reaction, either too drained to act, or simply unwilling to change her path. Living only on berries and mushrooms, Teresa endured as best she could. By day 69, a message arrived from the show. Her medical checkup was rescheduled earlier, and she was told to remain at camp. She imagined herself as the last one standing, waiting for the crew to declare her the victor. But reality struck harder. Her body was dangerously frail. The early medical review came because her last results were troubling. Her heart rate had risen 20% in just a week, a possible signal of looming heart failure. That made her the third contestant forced to leave the competition. The competition has now reached day 69, with only 2 contestants remaining. Biko's gill net once again came up empty. Desperate, he turned to an unusual source of food, pine bark. Stripping away the rough outer layer, he carefully gathered the softer inner bark, which held a trace of digestible sugars, fiber, and starch. He placed it into a pot to boil, and soon the water turned a deep red, looking almost appetizing. But when he tried to eat it, the bark proved nearly impossible to swallow. Drinking more only left him nauseous. Not wanting to waste what little remained in his stomach, he firmly covered the pot and resolved to search elsewhere for food. Clay had abandoned fishing, choosing instead to rely on traps and hunting. He had placed several snares for squirrels deep in the forest. The first one showed signs of disturbance, with countless rabbit tracks scattered nearby. As expected, the second trap held a catch. He assumed that would be his only reward for the day, yet 3 wire snares yielded 2 snowshoe hares, lifting his spirits as his food stores ran thin. The rich, savory stew of rabbit meat eased his hunger. Every bite felt invaluable, and he refused to waste even the bones, determined to extract every last calorie. That night, a sudden noise outside startled him, the sound of a net collapsing. Clay suspected a gray bear had toppled it. Grabbing a flashlight, he opened the door and aimed the beam into the dark, only to discover a fisher, an aggressive creature with known natural predators, safeguarded by local law. He knew he could not hunt it. Otherwise, Clay would have already reached for his bow. Biko returned from fetching water at the lake, forced to climb a steep slope and walk nearly 100 meters. Today, for the first time, he felt his heartbeat race, pounding violently in his chest. He suspected heart palpitations and grew dizzy, as if his body were breaking down. In exhaustion, Biko kept apologizing to his wife, confessing that he might not hold on much longer. Meanwhile, Clay too was nearing the end of his strength. On day 71, Thanksgiving Day, he finally pulled out the family photo he had carried with him, resisting until now. Flooded with longing, he wept, tears he hadn't shed in decades, resolving to go home to his loved ones. Then, on day 73, the cruise yacht suddenly came into view, signaling that someone had chosen to quit. The question was, who? The answer shocked them: Endurance King Billy. For days, he had noticed his heartbeat quickening, his breathing heavy and strained. Though he could bear hunger and isolation, his body had already lost 90 pounds, and any further loss would be life-threatening. Thus, Billy had no choice but to step away from the challenge. And on day 74, Clay stood victorious, crowned champion of Season 8 of the Wilderness Survival Challenge, taking home the grand prize.